What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in a recent video we took a look at this machine. It was a machine that was given to us for free, and of course we wanted to find out if we could game on it. To our surprise, it actually gamed quite well. Considering the specs, it had a Intel Pentium G630, 12GB of mismatched RAM, and quite surprisingly a GTX 750. Now that card wouldn't have come with this machine when it was new. If we actually look at the sticker on the front, it would have just run off the standard HD graphics built into the processor. But obviously we wanted to take it a little bit further. We wanted to see, could we actually upgrade this machine for free? As we got the machine for free, why not? So we made the call out to the community and we managed to get some parts. But will it make any difference? Let's find out. So this little machine wasn't actually bad at all. What actually held it back was that CPU itself. The Pentium G630 was something that you generally found in office or home PCs, and it wasn't really built for gaming. So we had a bit of a dig around and we remembered something that we received a while ago. The processor that we're going to be putting in this machine is an i5-2400. Now it's pretty old, but it is a 4-core 4-thread processor, which was much more powerful than the one that's actually in this machine. So that will probably make the biggest difference. Along with the processor, we managed to pick up another 8GB of crucial DDR. Now this actually matches the 8GB that was in the system because there was an 8 and a 4GB in there previously. So we'll get rid of that 4GB and we'll stick this 8 in, making a total of 16. I'm not sure that's going to make much of a difference, but considering we managed to salvage this from another machine that we got given for free, it's worth giving it a go. Last but not least, it won't make any difference to the performance of the machine, but we thought we'd do it anyway, and that is to swap out the power supply. Now this power supply isn't the greatest at all. It's an FSP 500 watts power supply. FSP are a pretty decent brand, although this one's probably too old to even have the bronze rating or anything like that on it. But we do actually come with a few extra features, including a PCIe Express power connector. Now that will help us for future upgrades. Obviously the GTX 750 in here that we're not going to be swapping out today doesn't actually require one of these connections, but it will give us something for the future. The main reason for swapping out the power supply though is because this thing in here is an unbranded power supply that I'm surprised has survived as long as it has. What I don't want to be doing is actually increasing the power of the machine, particularly with this power supply in, so it was awesome that we managed to get given this for free, and we have tested it, it does work perfectly fine. So the next steps is to get them swapped over. First up, we'll actually make modifications to the board, so obviously we want to be able to swap this RAM out. The sticks that were actually in it before was some HyperX Genesis 4GB stick with a bit of an overclocker sticker on it. That's quite funky, but we don't need that anymore. We're going to actually be putting in our other 8GB stick straight into the other slot. As I said before, that will give us a total now of 16GB, which is probably more than this system will ever need. You probably get away with 8, but we're going to get the dual channel, so we're going to get the extra speed there anyway. Next, we're going to change that processor, and all we need to do is simply unplug the cooler and undo all 4 screws in the corners. This will allow us to take the processor cooler off, and then we'll be able to swap the processor out. So let's get that done. Now the cooler for this system isn't great. It's a pretty standard thing. There's no copper involved. It's a full aluminium thing, but it's going to be more than enough for the i5-2400. It's just something to be aware of if you're doing this kind of change, that you want to make sure that the cooler coming off can actually support the new CPU. The Pentium G630 isn't a very high wattage processor at all, whereas the one that we're putting in is a 95 watts. So make sure that it does support that. To change the processor on an Intel, we simply just lift this little flap here, take the processor out, drop the new one in, making sure it's the right way around, and you do not want to drop this processor on and bend any pins. If you do, it's a brand new motherboard job. Lock the mechanism down and then just reinstall the cooler back on. Also make sure that you do any thermal paste. If you're doing this, you need to put it onto the processor clearly and then install the cooler. So we'll get this built back up and we'll get it back in the system, and then we'll have a look at doing the power supply. Now, generally older systems like this, in particular something like a home PC or a desktop work PC, they generally didn't really cable manage them at all. So if you can see, we've got all the wires just hanging out all from the system, and all we need to do is just start unplugging things. So we'll unplug our SSD, which needs to get plugged back on the motherboard. We'll unplug our CD drive. Yes, it does still have a CD drive. And then all we need to do is unscrew the 4 screws at the back and slide that power supply out. So we'll flip it down on its back and we'll get them taken out. Sliding the power supply out from inside the case, we can just simply lift it out and we can clearly see it is a bit of a hunk of junk and it's absolutely full of dust. We have actually opened up this unit and we've cleaned it up, so it's going to be a much better thing to put in. Installing the new power supply in, what we want to do is make sure that we've got the fan facing inside of the case. We don't want it at the top, otherwise it's going to get blocked with air. And interestingly enough, because this case didn't come with any kind of case cooling at all, there's no actual exhaust fans, this will act as a great big exhaust fan for this system. So not only are we going to get the power supply upgrade itself, but we're also going to get a big cooling upgrade as we go. So all we need to do is simply drop this in, slide it to the back, re-screw those screws back into the system, and then plug everything else back in. So now that we've got the power supply installed, everything's plugged in and everything seems to be fine, we just need to drop in the graphics card and give it another benchmark. Now, on the last video, we obviously benchmarked this system against a number of esports titles and it did really well. We didn't manage to actually get 60 frames per second in all of them in 1080p high, but if we'd have dropped those settings, we could have easily done it. But now that we've had the CPU and memory upgrade, let's see if we can actually beat that 60 frames per second in 1080p high on all those games.
Let's go.
So as you can see from those benchmarks, the system did brilliantly. The CPU upgrade was exactly what this needed, and it's now actually pretty much slowed down by the graphics card itself, which is something we can easily change out for pretty cheap nowadays. Considering this is a GTX 750, we could easily go to a 1050 Ti and make all the difference. To test it a little bit further, we obviously wanted to test something that was a little bit more demanding, so we tried Fortnite. It's not a game that I generally play or play very often, and unfortunately the system did struggle. In 1080p high settings, the frames per second weren't great, but the stuttering actually made it unplayable. So we dropped that down to 1080p low, and unfortunately it didn't make much of a difference. Although we saw slightly higher frames per second, the gameplay was very stuttery and it was just unplayable as well. So after that point, we tried it on the performance mode. Now, performance mode should actually be pretty much playable on anything, but again, it really struggled. We managed to see a much higher frame per second performance out of the system, but when things got tough in the game and when we got a lot of things going on, it actually really struggled. It made it pretty much unplayable once you got things moving on the screen. So unfortunately, this system isn't great for Fortnite, and there is much more work for us to do. In terms of other games, you're going to actually get a decent experience with some of the more older titles, particularly single player games. One of the games that we love to test on older systems is the 2013 version of Tomb Raider. It's a stunning looking game still today, and it's actually a really decent game to play. So we decided to benchmark that too, and we got some fantastic results, easily getting over 60 frames per second in 1080p high, pretty much on everything that we did in the game. And if we managed to lock those frames per second with our either VSync or some kind of frame limiter, the machine wouldn't have any problems coping with it at all. So if this is a kind of system that you've got, particularly of this age, those types of games are perfect for you. So now that we've got our little system actually playing some real decent games and getting some real good esports kind of results, we want you to tell us where to take it next. Obviously, we probably can't get away with getting things for free forever, particularly if we're looking at kind of graphics cards and things like that. Although we have got some recently in that were actually given to us, but we're not going to do that. What we want to do is we want to see, what do you think we should do? Should we turn this little PC into a games console, or should we actually turn it from this ugly looking office PC into something that looks more like a gaming machine? Drop a comment below and let us know which one we should do, and also suggest a budget that we should use. Obviously, you don't want to spend too much on a build like this, particularly when you got it free, but it does allow you to spend a little bit extra because you didn't spend anything on it in the first place. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see that video in the future, and particularly if you like this kind of content. And also drop us a like on this video if you like the content, as well as liking our little machine. It's a great little machine, particularly for free, and hopefully the next time you see it, it's going to look totally different. But until then, we'll catch you in the next one.